Hey guys, Nate here again. This is part two of building our first experiment, and if you'll remember, we're still in a draft state up here. So this is really the time when we're playing around with different combinations of processes, starting to test different variables, etc. And so what that really boils down to, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, is down here in the bottom is in our experiment. Our experiment is built up of a series of recipes, and so as a quick reminder, a wafer prep recipe is one of those, and then another recipe would be depositing that TiO2. In this video, what we're going to be talking about is the difference between what we're calling a known recipe, a recipe that everybody in the lab is using, and then what's called sort of a user recipe, what's just you individually that you're still starting to work on. And the first sign that you'll see here, I went ahead and added one. You'll see a couple of gray recipes, and so those are indicating that they're known recipes. And what that should tell you is that these have been vetted, tested by multiple users inside of your lab and can be counted as reliable, so to speak. And then any of these recipes that are shaded orange, that would be a recipe that only you can see, and is kind of indicating that maybe it's something you're still working on, and focusing your efforts there. So why that's useful, particularly, so if you can see under this one, for example, this user recipe, we're working on a couple different variations of how hot we want to actually deposit this material. So right now we're going to be running it at 210C. That may or may not work well, but that's all part of running the experiment, right? But what's useful here is maybe we want to do another layer that's similar. Well, since we put a lot of time into putting all of this great information in here once, we'll never have to do it again. So when we come up to, say, add another process, and that could be in this experiment or any more experiments forever, when we're using Hula, we can, when we go to add a new process, if you start kind of typing deposition, you'll start to see these different flags here. We mentioned it before, and you'll know, pretty self-explanatory. So we have a known process, which again, that's something that's distributed across the lab that has been tested and vetted, something that can be relied on. And then we have these user processes, and that oxide deposition that I just mentioned before, that's flagged as a user process. And so let's say we want to use that again. You can sort of quickly preview what you did last time and add it again. So again, really the purpose of that piece is to make it much easier. So starting to control potential areas for failures, and starting to standardize as much as we can, because I mean, in this example, if we figured out steps 1 and 2 in this experiment, let's only focus on step 3. And that's where process development comes in, and that's where that's really useful. Similarly, when you're going to add that other process, and we'll get into this in the next video, is say we wanted to add something different, but maybe just it wasn't in here. Well, just as you continue to type, things will continue to go away, and maybe we'll just call this guy a new process, and you'll notice that there's nothing popping up. That's because this is a brand new title. That means that you're adding something brand new, and this is going to be something that's going to be added to your processes in your recipe library, which again is something we'll get into later. So something that's important here is treat that title really as a file name. There's only it's going to end up being a unique title for this process that'll end up sticking with it throughout its life. And then this process description is really just for you. So next time you're populating it, it kind of helps jog your memory as to what you're trying to accomplish. So just like I don't know, maybe that may or may not be relevant to what we're working on. So when we hit done, you'll notice that there's actually nothing in here yet, because again, it's a brand new process, and we'll be going into in one of the next videos in this series exactly what it looks like to build an individual process. But a quick recap as to what we're looking at, it's just important to understand, looking at the difference between these known versus experimental processes or my user processes, and quickly highlighted again by gray versus orange. So, well, that's a lot of information to take in. I think as we start to digest it and you run through one or two of these experiments, you'll understand as to why that's so helpful. and makes actually quite a bit of logical sense as it starts to tie into more features with the rest of the system. Well, great. That's it for this one. In part 3 of this series, we'll be looking at actually adding process. We'll be adding steps to this new process that we just created down here. All right. See you on that one. Talk to you soon.